All right, kids, gather round. It's time for an interview on Growing Up Punk. So this year marks 20 years of No Motiv's and the Sadness Prevails album out on Vagrant Records, and they're celebrating that. They had a remix and remastered version released digitally, as well as a vinyl release forthcoming, depending on when you're listening to this, I suppose. I had the opportunity to chat with Roger Camero. Now, Roger has been in the band since the Sadness Prevails days, still in the band now, obviously, but his roles have kind of changed over time. He started as the bass player in the band, when he joined the band, I should say, and then eventually he moved into the role of drums, and on this current celebration sort of thing with some upcoming shows, he's back to bass. You know, it's just the way it is. But anyways, this is my conversation with Roger Camero from No Motiv, celebrating 20 years of And the Sadness Prevails. So, I mean, I guess we could start with the fact that you're celebrating a 20-year anniversary of an album. Like, that's pretty legit. So, like,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there were no talks about doing any sort of band type of situation in the past couple of years. We've all branched out and have been doing our own thing. But last year, I acknowledged the fact that we were having this 20-year anniversary coming up, and it just kind of worked out that we were all down to do this together. And Pat actually hit me up, who hasn't been in the band since 2002, I believe, and he had told me he got a hold of the master tapes for the album, and he had interest in having me remix it and kind of doing some sort of reissue of the album. And one thing led to another, and here we are.
That's awesome.
None of us thought it would even get to where we are now.
Yeah.
Our original intentions were much smaller than this. So this is everything that's been happening has been truly awesome. We didn't expect really any of this to happen to this degree. So we're all really happy about what's going on. So
that's awesome.
Cool, man.
So I mean, maybe we'll start at kind of the beginning, get a little bit of the history of No Motiv, because if I'm correct, that was and the Sadness Prevails was your third full length album, right?
Yeah. Well, technically, Sadness to us is the second record. It's my first record in the band.
Oh, okay.
But the collection of songs known as Scarred, that was never meant to actually be a record.
Okay.
So, and I could speak for the band. They were just demos or songs recorded for compilations and whatnot. And when the band got signed to Vagrant, before I had joined the band, the Edge Records, the label that put out Cynical, we were obligated as a band to give them a second record. And so instead of recording a whole record, they basically just took whatever, like literally anything they had and put it together and created Scarred, did the whole layout, pressed it, didn't consult with the band ever for it. So it kind of is what it is. We kind of put up a little fuss about it once we were on Vagrant, but the fact of the matter is we owed them something, and we had to stay true to that. So
yeah. I actually listened.
That exists, but it was never meant to exist.
And now, I actually I heard it for the first time today, I knew there was some stuff,
Okay.
some stuff out prior to And the Sadness Prevails, and I was like, just kind of looking to see, kind of to see if there was a progression in sound at all from, the earlier stuff to Sadness, and so I came across Scarred, and I was like, oh, because I'd seen Cynical come up before, but never Scarred, and so I listened to it today, and it is interesting because, as you mentioned, there's actually a couple songs on that record that end up on Sadness, which I guess is maybe an interesting place to start. Like, why those songs? Like, how did they end up on the And the Sadness Prevails as well?
If my memory serves me correctly, and my memory is not the greatest, I think Scarred actually might have come out like while we were recording the record or after we were done recording the record, and we truly had no idea what Joey, the label owner, what he was doing. Yeah. So to us, nobody had ever heard the songs, and they were songs like So What, Tribute, Somewhere. I believe, at least those songs existed before I had ever joined the band, and they were still in the repertoire of the band's set, and they were staples. And although we were kind of moving in a different direction, like we still felt like those songs were very relevant to us, even though I wasn't in the band when the band had written them. They were songs that still were important that we felt needed to see the light of day, and we had no idea that they were going to be used on Scarred. So that's why those songs still made the record, even though it's kind of funny to listen to it 20 years later and hear these very hardcore influenced songs. Yeah. Well, on a majority record that's not that vibe.
Yeah, and that was what was kind of interesting to me in listening to Scarred today. I was like, man, there's definitely some hardcore influence on there, or I guess the appropriate term is, according to your Wikipedia page, would be nardcore, which I was like, what the hell is nardcore? And I went and looked at it. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool.
Nardcore is very specific to the city that we all grew up in, which is Oxnard, California. Yeah. It's a place that half the band still lives in Oxnard, and I no longer live in Oxnard. I live in Orange County, and Max, our guitar player, lives in San Diego. We still visit Oxnard on a pretty regular basis, and we hold that city dear to our hearts. A lot of our friends and family still live there, so it still feels like home to us every time we go back. But nardcore is a very long-standing, legendary punk community out of Ventura County, namely Oxnard. But it stretched as far as Simi Valley and Santa Barbara. So nardcore, for those who may be semi or very punk inclined, bands like Ill Repute, Aggression, Dr. No came out of Oxnard, and then Santa Barbara, RKL, which later some of the members started or became members of Lagwagon, and then in Simi Valley, a band called Scared Straight, which later some of the members started 10 Foot Pole. That's how this whole area was a big community, and I would consider Strung Out even part of that family. So nardcore is not like totally well known for like the average punk fan, but for those who might have been born in the 70s or the 80s, or that's something that might be relevant to them, but it's something that's important to us. So even though it's like a total mystery to most people, we still we throw it out there because that's that's our stuff.
Yeah, no, that's cool, and I think it lists you as like a second wave nardcore band. So that's pretty great. But I guess
Yeah.
what I was going to ask is because you alluded a little bit to changing directions going into this record, because hearing those like hardcore influences really coming through on the older stuff, was that like, because I mean I don't know what you guys label Sadness to be if you were to put it in a genre, but it definitely, for me, always like stood out as like a solid, emo album, if that's fair to say. Was that changed because the lyrics got a little more introspective, music got a little more melodic? Was that change intentional, or did it just kind of happen over time? As your songwriting progressed.
It just happened.
Yeah.
It oddly enough, it just happened, and there were never words spoken about that evolution. When I joined the band, the band had freshly been signed to Vagrant. They recorded 2 songs, Nostalgia and So What, for the first Vagrant compilation, 5 Years on the Streets, with their original bass player, Dave Brandon. And a little backstory, although I joined the band in '98, I went to the same high school as Max, our guitar player, and I played in another local band, and so I follow them pretty much from the start of No Motiv, and I consider myself, like many others, peers of theirs, like huge fans of the band. So I saw the evolution from like the more classic Fat Records, Epitaph influenced kind of music to the more heavily hardcore influenced era of the band, and that came with what music we were all listening to collectively, because we all grew up on Face to Face, NoFX, Lagwagon, Bad Religion. Like, all those bands meant so much to us. And a couple years down the line, more the classic hardcore bands and bands of that era that we were listening to, namely Ignite and a band called Outspoken, and In My Eyes, Sick of It All. A lot of those bands had huge influence on us, and from the Fat Records family, and probably one of the biggest influences, Good Riddance. All those bands had so much of us, and that kind of took the band on different musical journeys, so to speak. But for whatever sound that Sadness became, I can't actually pinpoint where that came from, other than the fact that there was, before Sadness came out, and probably around the time that the songs for Scarred were written and recorded, we had this term called UC, and that stood for ugly chords. And the ugly chords came into popularity from the album Less Talk, More Rock by Propagandhi.
Okay.
If you listen to that record, there's tons of ugly chords.
Yeah.
And that was, it almost became like a challenge. How can we write riffs with these chords that we as a whole couldn't tell you what they were technically, but we knew they sounded cool to us, I guess. But none of us studied music. None of us could read music, none of that stuff. So it was a matter of like, flailing around on a guitar, finding these finger formations that we realized could create these kind of, to us, semi-abstract chord progressions. That's kind of what led into the world of And the Sadness Prevails songs.
That's funny.
Musically, it still came from the same place. Maybe when I joined the band, there's, I don't know, maybe a couple bands that I had listened to that weren't punk bands that heavily influenced me, like like Pixies or Depeche Mode or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe some of that non-punk influence came into play. But as far as punk bands, we were all really close friends and listened to pretty much the same bands in our teenage years. So musically, it's kind of semi inexplicable how this all came to be, and the whole idea of the band going from like the West Coast new school punk beat to the more East Coast hardcore beat, and then just straight up slowing down and maybe even using the clean channel. That it just happened.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't tell you how that came to be. It just kind of happened. And lyrically, and I don't want to speak too much for Jeremy, but just from that era of life and us being all the way from our mid-teens to our late teens, early 20s, that's prime age for a lot of relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
Learning about relationships, being in relationships, the hardships and the struggles.
Yeah.
And everything that comes with being in that age and that time of life. Sadness is a direct representation of what Jeremy and a lot of us were going through at the time.
Yeah.
So he's always worn his heart on his sleeve, and never like filtered out his feelings on paper. He just brought it, so why else would we call the album And Sadness Prevails,
right? Yeah,
I guess,
say that.
It was a highly sensitive time in our lives, so it's definitely a timestamp to that era.
Yeah, I wanted to go back real quickly because you mentioned the ugly chords, and I just thought this was kind of funny because when you guys, like specifically Sadness and then Diagram for Healing, like those two albums for me, like I loved them to death. And so when I was in I had a classic, these are classic tales, I had a high school punk band once, but we wrote a song, and as a guitar player and songwriter, in my mind I was like, oh yeah, this is the No Motiv song. And because in my the sound for me was very much inspired by those two records, this one specific song. But when I look back on the songs, or on that song, I'm like, yeah, it was probably the only song where I didn't just play straight up power chords. Like and that wouldn't have been intentional. Like that wouldn't have been me knowing, or like like what you guys were doing. It was just like you just picking up on that sound. But so that's pretty great. I did want to, awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, you said you didn't want to speak much lyrically because obviously you didn't write the lyrics. I
didn't write the lyrics.
Yeah, but so as far as like songs being crafted as the band, whether it was the same then as it is now or more recently or whatever, but how did that picture look? Like, did he come with a complete song? Did Jeremy come with a complete song, or did you guys kind of piece it together? While jamming. There
were a handful of songs that. Maybe he had written the lyrics to with the riffs, and so it was a complete idea. I would say, judging from the demos that we had created before we made the record, I think Waiting Hurt, Sunday at 6 p.m., Nostalgia, Solemn, songs like that. Maybe those were already fleshed out and written before. Oh, actually, Sunday was written before I was in the band. Mm-hmm. That song was part of the So What tribute.
Okay, yeah.
Cluster of songs. So yeah, he had a handful of songs that were pretty much fully written. And there were a couple songs that I believe might have been written while we were already recording the music to the record.
Okay,
Perhaps
yeah.
even maybe a song or two were written in the studio.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to like literally be the fact person on that, but I could have sworn I heard within recent time that Jeremy might have went into the studio not having lyrics for Shells.
Okay.
And maybe Trevor might have helped him with that, perhaps.
So that's actually an interesting segue, because I was going to ask how, when you say Trevor, you're talking Trevor Keith from Face to Face. I'm assuming that's who you mean by Trevor.
Yep, absolutely.
So how did that come to be, working with Trevor on not only this record, but then kind of going forward too?
With Diagram, yeah. So the owner of Vagrant, I don't think he owns Vagrant anymore, but at the time and for a very long time, Rich Egan also managed Face to Face. And Trevor, had already produced one record on Vagrant for a band called Boxer from Boston, which might have been literally the first band ever on Vagrant, if not the second.
Okay,
I think we might have been the third band on the label. It was Boxer, Go to Hells, and us, I think, were the label lineup at one point. And so I'm pretty sure Rich definitely knew that we were all fans of Face to Face, and probably knew that we would be super stoked to have Trevor produce a record. So I'm pretty sure it was as simple as that. Trevor had already established himself as a producer who has already worked on records, or a record on Vagrant, and so we were just kind of the next in line, and an opportunity for him to produce another band. So that's I believe that's how that came to be, and we absolutely loved working with him. He was fun in the studio, had great ideas, and he and Chad Blindman were a duo. Okay. They worked together. Yeah. And that carried over into Diagram for Healing. Yeah. And outside of our band, that carried on in the Face to Face world, as Chad, I believe Chad engineered almost everything Vagrant after that. Yeah. So it was kind of like a family affair after a while, you know. Okay, yeah. Everything felt natural and normal, and it was great. It was one of those situations where for a bunch of dudes from Oxnard were like, this is out of control. How did this ever happen? You know. Yeah. Which led to us having the opportunity to tour it Face to Face. Yeah. Which in itself was mind blowing. Yeah. To us, still is when I think about it. Yeah. And we're just, we couldn't be more thankful for that entire world in that situation to have gone down like it did.
That brings up another. You're just segueing into different questions I had. So this is great. But I was going to ask, because when I was first introduced to the band, to you guys, was when you were on tour with MXPX, and you came up and you played in Calgary, is where I saw you guys, and that was there were a couple things that happened. One, obviously, I was introduced to you guys, and you would go on to release one of, like, for sure when I was in high school and beyond, I was saying, like, Diagram was like my go-to album. I could probably almost sing word for word along with that thing even still. But
awesome.
Yeah, so there was that introducing me to you guys, but then also, kind of like cementing the fact, or the idea of not skipping out on openers, because I went to that show, especially at that time. That's before. I mean, the internet was around, but it wasn't what it is today, right? Like, there was no streaming services where you can just check out any band and every band all over the world. So I really had no idea what you guys sounded like going in, and went to this show and was just like, the only piece of merch that I came home with from that show was in the Sadness Prevails. So, which I thought was
cool.
Yeah, pretty awesome. But do you remember, like, what were some of the tours that you guys were on when Sadness was out, when you guys were trying to push that record? Do you remember some of those?
Yeah. Well, before the record came out, the first tour we ever did, the first actual real legit tour we ever did was with Good Riddance and 88 Fingers Louie. So right off the bat, we just knocked out two big influences in our lives. And that's the beginning of just being a bunch of spoiled bastards, for real.
There you go.
Like we couldn't have been luckier in the world of opening tours and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And Good Riddance, to this day, they've been so awesome and huge influences on us, and even 88. And funny about that, they just wrapped up a little Southern California run together, and so Pat, our drummer, and I got to catch up with those dudes when they played in Ventura. So that was super awesome. Last night I saw Face to Face, and it was the last night of tour, so they cut out of there like as fast as humanly possible. So I wasn't able to say hi to those dudes, but one of the tours that we did on the Sadness record was a face-to-face tour where they supported their cover record, Standards and Practices.
Yeah.
And on that tour, the main support band was Jimmy Eat World.
Oh, sick.
So that was absolutely mind-blowing because I am a huge Jimmy fan, and I believe that was Clarity had come out, and it had been out for a while, and perhaps they were prepping or had written Bleed American. So it was around that era of time, and that was super cool.
This is where I was gonna say real quick. This is where I like shamelessly name drop another podcast that I recently discovered that's so good. It's called Jimmy Eat Pod, and they literally are releasing they're releasing an episode on every single Jimmy Eat World song. So if you're a big Jimmy, they're only like I think 2 songs in right now. So if you want to get caught up at the time we're recording, I don't know by the time this gets released if they'll have another one out or not. But cool. It's something else. It's definitely worth a listen. But sorry to cut you off. So Jimmy Eat World, we're on that tour, and then where were you going from there?
I think we did a Strung Out tour before we toured with MXPX. We did like a pretty lengthy Strung Out tour. But around the time we put out Sadness was when Vagrant kind of unleashed us to the world without the training wheels of the elders.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, Vagrant was on the verge of some of the biggest artists in the scene at that time.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, man. To be at the age that we were and to be known as the babies of the band.
Yeah.
Shortly after Sadness, they or maybe while we were making Sadness, it's been so long, but right around that time, that's when they signed Get Up Kids. So attention had already it's not that they ever lost any of their interest in us whatsoever, but they had to divide it because Get Up Kids were very much a much more well-known up and coming band. I don't even know if I should say up and coming because they have already established themselves, right?
Yeah.
So, and then after that was Saves the Day. So right after they signed us, the label roster just started to explode, and by the time we made Diagram, that's when Hot Rod Circuit, Alkaline Trio, Dashboard, that whole just explosion went down. But yeah, it was definitely a spectacle to witness seeing them, because they were in I don't remember exactly the neighborhood that they were in Santa Monica, but it was a tiny office, and it was a couple employees with like a couple rooms on a second story of some place.
Yeah.
And that next thing we know, they had a whole entire building in Culver City. So it was definitely awesome to watch the label grow.
Yeah.
And subsequently, you know, having all these bands on the label definitely helped our band get a little more recognition. So
Yeah.
and of course some more really sweet, crucial tour opportunities
Sure.
that came our way. So I'll just say we've been lucky from the very beginning, you know. Like all the bands that we got to support, we couldn't dream that sort of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But it was always funny when we would head out for our own headlining tour. Reality would hit us pretty hard.
Yeah.
you go from like, you know, supporting MXPX,
Yeah.
or being a middle band on an MXPX tour, and face-to-face tours, and being out by yourselves and playing, you know, who knows where. Like not even a fraction of the people that were at these shows, but you know, we did what we had to do.
Yeah.
And along the way, we definitely had some cool bands that we broke down with along the way. Like what went down in that era of time. I know we did a couple of Atari's tours, which were sweet.
Yeah.
And I think on one of those Atari's tours, the opening band was they weren't on the tour, but they were on one show of the tour.
Yeah.
They were called A Newfound Glory.
Yes. Classic. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when we got to the East Coast, we did some stuff with Midtown.
Yeah.
Midtown was a band, and who else was out there? I think Hot Rod Circuit, Piebald. I know we did some stuff with Piebald.
Yeah.
The eras the eras of touring between Sadness and Diagram, they kind of you know, get a little jumbled in
Bleed
in my
together
brain.
a little bit. Yeah,
but absolutely.
That's fair.
But I think we created enough of a camaraderie with some of these bands that you know, we did multiple tours with MX, and we did multiple tours with Face to Face, and
right on.
You know,
so
that was cool.
Maybe you can answer a question that we couldn't come up with. We were like racking our brains trying to remember. When I say we, I mean myself and Aaron. On it was the MXPX episode. Actually, we were trying to figure out when that tour was, because he was convinced it was earlier, and I was like, no, I think it would have been like at the earliest, I guess maybe late '99. But do you remember when that tour was?
All right. So any MXPX tour that we did, it was before the Ever Passing Moment.
Yeah.
Is that the name of that record?
Yep.
Okay. So it was definitely slowly going the way of the Buffalo era.
Yeah.
So, and I remember that record came out before No Motiv ever even toured.
Right. Yeah. Because I think Buffalo was 98.
Got it. I'm going to say that the first MXPX tour was most likely 2000.
Okay.
So maybe even as late as 2001.
Okay. Would it have been like? Because I feel like it was cold, so like early in the year for a while. I guess. I mean, it could also be end of the year. But
it was a bit cold. It wasn't frostbitten cold, but it was chilly.
Yeah. Sure. So like. Ever Passing Moment. Now we just go down a rabbit hole. I'm trying to see if I can find the release date of Ever Passing Moment. It just says 2000. So
Ever Passing Moment came out in 2000.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah, like I'm just looking on Discogs, so it doesn't give me an actual date. It just says the year 2000. But here's the thing. I don't know how accurate this is because I was noticing this. 2019, you're celebrating 20 years of And the Sadness Prevails, but Discogs has it labeled as 1998.
They do.
Yeah.
They do, and I've been told this, and don't believe the hype.
Yeah.
Dog. 99.
Yeah, that's
February 99.
Yeah, okay. So unless the only thing I can guess maybe is Discogs is referencing like the 98 comes from when it was recorded. Like, would you have been?
Yeah, it was recorded in 98.
Yes.
That Good Riddance 88 Fingers Louie tour was in 98.
Yeah, so
I believe in the fall.
Oh, so weird.
And
so
we recorded
yeah
after that.
Because
the whole doing that tour and recording the record. I can't remember if we recorded the record first and then we went on tour, or we went on tour and then recorded the record.
So that's funny. This is the weird thing on Discogs though, because it has the CD listed as 99, but the vinyl listed as 98.
Oh, really?
So someone, I think, probably just put the information for the vinyl in wrong, and so then it's just picking the earliest year. But that's actually leads me to another question though about the vinyl. Because I think this is how the internet's weird, man. Because I think this is how this whole discussion started with me and whoever is running or was running your Instagram page at the time. Because I don't know if multiples of you are on it. I think it was Pat that I was messaging with in the end. I don't know if he's the one who's running it.
I'm pretty sure that Pat did the whole dialogue with you until he pass it along to me to do the pod.
So the reason I bring that up is because so I have a copy of Sadness on vinyl, like that original pressing, and so I had posted about it, about how I had it, and I was kind of like, oh, it was the day after or whatever you guys announced the reissue that's coming out. I said, in celebration of that, I'm listening to this today, to which then there was a conversation that started on it. And so how does it feel weird to be able to look back and go, because I mean, that's kind of like a dead era for vinyl. In the early 90s, and because then your next record, like Diagram, there is no, as far as I can tell, there was no release for vinyl.
There is no vinyl.
Yeah, I don't think you guys had a vinyl release until Winter Long. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
I was able to track that one down too. But so how weird is it to look back? Because I feel like, I mean, there must not, unless that was right at the tail end of like labels just pressing stuff to vinyl. Because nowadays it's like you release something, especially if you have the backing of a label or whatever, there's likely going to be a vinyl pressing as well. But do you remember that decision and being involved in that and why that happened? Or was that kind of just, outside of you guys?
I think when the Sadness came out, it was the norm still.
Oh, okay.
It was on the tail end of the norm to have vinyl. I think it was just a proper format for the label to push. Yeah. And I honestly don't know how many copies that they pressed for that.
Yeah.
And when Diagram came out in 2001, I think vinyl was declared, I don't want to say declared dead, but
I think it was. Yeah.
It was not popular at all.
Yeah.
Because CDs were now exciting and much more convenient to people. So,
well, and I think
it's safe to say that Vagrant did not have intentions for us to have vinyl after that record.
I mean,
they had moved on from that format.
Yeah, late 90s, early 2000s, you're also in like the peak of downloading, right? Like before we get into like streaming services many years down the road. But I'm sure when the music industry was taking a hit there, they're like, well, no one's but old people are buying records these days.
Yeah, right.
And now I believe it's like the fastest growing as far as like physical sales. It's not selling the most, but as far as growth is concerned, it's leading the way for physical sales, which is great. And I mean that leads you guys to
vinyl
doing
special again.
Yeah, well, I think this is. I mean, I don't know if you collect vinyl yourself, but this is like my relationship with vinyl is once. I mean, it was back probably 2005 or so. Like my grandfather, they were moving out of their house into a smaller place, and he had this like cabinet record player, and he was like, "I can't take this with me, do you want it? And so I was like, sure. And then he gave me a couple records, and from there I kind of bought the odd thing. Like, I think I went and found Very Emergency by the Promise Ring was one of the first records I bought. But, and then, you know, for a while I didn't buy anything because it was really like vinyl wasn't, you could still get it really cheap, right? But it wasn't everywhere, especially new music.
Yeah.
And then, you know, as soon as streaming music came out, it was kind of like you lose a little bit of something with streaming music, right? Like, I mean, I'd much rather sit down with a CD or a record in my hand and like look at something, you know, sort of deal. But, you know, so that's kind of, for me anyways, why I kind of got back to buying records again. But, yeah, so with the 20th anniversary vinyl reissue that you guys have coming out, it's not just a straight up reissue because you guys have remixed and remastered it, right?
Yeah. We, like I said, Pat had been given the master tapes because we recorded the record completely analog in '98, and that's before Pro Tools was presented to us as a format to recording. And so one of my best friends, Armand Tamboris, he has a 2-inch tape recorder, and one thing led to another, and we got the tapes into his hands, and him and I believe we christened his tape machine with that album, and we dumped it into the old Pro Tools, and I went from there and remixed it. We actually dumped it onto digital format much earlier in the year. Yeah. But I do studio recording for work, right, and have other bands that I play in, and so the year was flying by, and then I came to realize that I had totally neglected the fact that I needed to actually do the mix of the record. So luckily I have Pat to remind me that it was something that we needed to do and wanted to do, and so got that done, and the ball started rolling very rapidly after that, because man, I don't think I mixed the record completely and got it mastered until July.
Okay, yeah.
And so the whole opportunity to put it out ourselves and press it on vinyl, all of that came together very quickly.
Right.
So quickly that the agreement on putting out the vinyl came into fruition before I even had the mixes completed.
That's awesome.
And so the whole completing the mix of the record and then creating the re-recordings for the additional 7-inch that is available with the album.
Yeah.
That 7-inch we had like a 1 week deadline to like record and mix and master that and finish the record itself. And so I just put life on hold and got that bad boy done. And here we are.
So so that 7-inch though, like, because they're songs that aren't on, like they're not new songs. They're also not songs from Sadness. They're from your other records.
Yeah.
Like, was that done kind of as like a little bit of a tie-in, like to give something a little more to the rest of the library that you guys have, or was it just like what led to those songs and deciding to include the 7-inch with it?
So when we decided to have the supplemental 7-inch, we kind of had the band collectively come to some sort of decision on whether we wanted to take some of the Sadness songs and maybe re-record them, or the original idea was to do two acoustic versions of
Right.
Sadness songs.
Yeah.
And I don't think that collectively as a band we were all feeling that idea.
Right.
And so the reason why we did Broken and Burned for the 7-inch is because we, as a band, I think that's one of our favorite songs.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah.
And we felt like it would be fun to, that song in particular, it would be fun to kind of re-record it.
Right.
Like, I think the term we were loosely throwing around during that recording was the adult version of Broken and Burned.
What do you mean by that?
AKA the slow old man version
that's
of
fair.
Broken and Burned.
That's awesome.
I remember when we were like conceptualizing the idea of recording it.
Yeah.
And the Pixies are one of, if not my favorite band of all time.
Yeah.
And one of the bands that I think I pass along to those dudes. We all love the album Bossa Nova by the Pixies, a lot.
Yeah.
And so when we were getting ready to record it, I was telling Max and Jeremy, like, all right, this is going to be our Bossa Nova version of Broken and Burned.
Yeah.
So anybody who might like that album by that band and listens to Broken and Burned, this recording,
Yeah.
you might be able to tell that that's what was in my brain when we recorded it and I mixed it.
That's awesome.
Aside from that song, I think Life Goes On is a very important song to us. And although Pat wasn't in the band when we made Daylight Breaking, I think he's a big fan of the song. And we just all, we felt like that would be a great song that would translate into an acoustic song.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how that all happened.
All right.
And, the whole thing about Sadness songs, maybe not translating the way we would like it to acoustically, that kind of led to Life Goes On being the one to be acoustic.
So, I mean, you re-recorded Broken and Burned. Was there any re-recording done on Sadness? Because I know, like, on The Waiting Hurt, which you guys just dropped, like, put a video out for a few days ago.
Yeah.
There's some added vocals or whatever at the end of it.
At the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, how did that, like, are those vocals re-recorded, or were they in the original files and you just found them?
Yeah. Okay. So there's all right. So in the dumping of the record onto a digital format, I was able to see everything that was recorded.
Right.
And the recording of the album didn't exceed ever 24 tracks of sound.
Right.
And back then you had to record time code. And so that's not a sound that you use on the record. That's just like technical stuff.
Right.
And then there's the click track, which was only used for intros of songs where there weren't drums.
Right.
Like Solemn or Waiting Hurt. And then so there were a couple of songs that had stuff that maybe wasn't used on the record or was so low in the mix you never knew it was there.
Right.
So that vocal part at the end of Waiting Hurt, that was just muted. That was just the Chad or Trevor and Chad decided that just didn't need to be there on the record.
That's great.
And maybe like I've recorded Jeremy a million times. Like sometimes he just ad-libs a bunch of stuff and later on down the line we're just like, we don't need that.
Right.
You know? And so that might have been we don't need that when the record was mixed. And, the record's literally been out for 20 years. Fans of the band and of the record know that record as well as they would ever want to know it. Yeah. And so if we were going to remix the record, we had absolutely no intention of re-recording anything or adding anything to it. But if there was something that existed in the recording that isn't actually featured or audible on it. I kind of wanted to sneak it in there a little bit more than what was on the record. So there's I think I can recall 4 different things on the record that maybe the average person couldn't really hear or acknowledge so much. Waiting Hurt being the biggest one.
Right.
That vocal line like literally didn't exist.
Yeah.
On So What, the breakdown of the song with the gang vocals.
Yeah.
The original version of the song, the gang vocals don't come in until like halfway through that part, but I just left them in there for the whole duration of us actually doing the gang vocals.
Yeah.
And then mid-season change, there's like this weird like backup vocal that I never knew if it existed on the record, and if it is in there, it's so not audible.
Right.
I just kind of barely put it in there, and it's sort of there, so you might notice it.
Okay.
And then the one that I get the most questions about is the tambourine in Stay.
Okay. Yeah.
It's on the record.
Yeah.
And if you listen closely, you can hear it. But Pat told me, yo, make that tambourine like for real, dog. So the tambourines...
It's for real now.
In there. It's for reals in there.
That's awesome.
More than I would ever want it, but hey, if it made Pat happy, then I'm happy for him.
So, that's great. So you did like there's some subtle differences as you just brought up, kind of with some of the tracks. What about like the artwork in general for the album? Is it all basically the same as the original, or have you kind of updated or messed around with that at all?
The artwork update is very, very, very slight.
Right.
It's hardly noticeable. One of my best friends, Donnie Phillips, took on the liberty of working on the artwork Redux, and we wanted to keep it as tasteful and classic as possible. So the original artwork, which all the photography was done by our good friend Gabe Cano, and my brother Ray assisted in a lot of the layout stuff. When we were getting ready to do this, I first turned to Ray and Gabe about the artwork, and came to realize that that was made before the era of everybody having, Photoshop and Illustrator and all that stuff at their disposal. So we kind of had to dig deep, and Vagrant was kind enough to give us the original files, which Donnie had to reformat into 2019 software.
Right. Yeah.
And when he got it, he suggested, "Hey man, let's just kind of keep it real. Let's not try to. You're not adding anything to the record other than like giving it an updated mix. So let's just be subtle about it." So the only thing you'll ever really notice is that on the cover, the text is gold.
Oh, okay.
That's it. Yeah. So if you look at that little tiny thumbnail picture on Spotify or Apple Music or iTunes, it's just the font color is different. Other than that, you won't know anything.
That's too funny.
But but for the vinyl, I think Donnie kept it real. There's an insert, probably a very similar insert to the one that was made for the original pressing.
Right.
I would say he probably updated the font. I think he tried to keep the same font, but just if you on the vinyl, so you could see like how pixelated it is.
Yeah.
For that era.
Yeah.
And we're none of us are going to know what it looks like until it actually gets sent back to us in November when it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I'm imagining that it's just going to look a little cleaner, I guess.
Yeah.
But we just have, it's just updated technical stuff that put into the credits. There's nothing all that special. But I believe for the 7-inch, Donnie made that from scratch, and Jeremy, our singer, wrote a little. He wrote a little something for the people.
All right, there you go. That's
a
fair.
Some.
That's
so
fair.
We try to keep the Sadness vinyl itself kind of pure as we could, and then use the 7-inch for the kind of personalized.
Right. So the center label on Sadness is still going to be confusing. Every time I put that record on, I'm like, I don't know what side it's on.
He fixed that.
Okay, so is it labeled now, or is there like just a subtle difference?
He labeled it now.
Every time I put it on, I'm like, I don't know what side I'm on, because both labels are exactly the same. I'm sure if I look in like the dead space where the etching is, I'm sure somewhere it'll say like 1 or 2 or A or B.
Oh yeah.
But it's also the dead space is pretty small on it, right? So I'm like, I don't know. We'll just put it on and see if we get that drum feel at the beginning of Nostalgia or not. If we don't, I'll flip it over.
Just memorize the grooves, dude.
Yeah, right. Excellent idea.
If it wasn't for Donnie, I think that would have went over our heads.
Yeah.
But luckily, he's a professional, and he put text.
That's too funny.
What it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and he pulled it out. I'm like, I don't know. We'll just see what happens. We'll put it on and see where we go. But
Donnie's going to appreciate that one for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's too good. I think. Oh, there was one last thing I did want to talk about, and you had kind of mentioned how Pat wasn't in the band for a little while. So, because you guys have played or are playing a couple reunion shows, or like anniversary shows, I should say.
Yeah, we're playing this coming weekend.
Yeah, with the original lineup for Sadness Prevails.
Not literally the original lineup, because I am not the original bass player, but
for Sadness Prevails. Yeah. So I guess how did that all come together? Was it just like when he got a hold of the masters and your brains started turning a little bit, or?
Well, the band hasn't done anything since, I believe, 2014, which is the last time we probably played shows to support Winterlong.
Yeah.
So in the time that Pat hadn't been in a band, we recorded Daylight Breaking, the Lola EP, which is basically the same recording session, and then years later, Winterlong.
Yeah.
When we did Daylight, Pat was kind of going in a different direction musically as Max, Jeremy, and I collectively. Mm-hmm. And Pat had joined a band called From Satellite with some other friends from Ventura County. And we just kind of went our separate ways for an extended amount of time. And From Satellite and No Motiv played shows together, so it wasn't like a big, drama-filled thing or anything like that. It was just kind of like, it's, we need to just do our thing. Mm-hmm. But since then, a lot of time has passed, and whatever might have built up in that time that was a little strange or weird, we've all very well have gotten over and have smoothed over and reconciled and long before any of this. So we've all been friends and love each other very much. But it just so happens that, in this time now we got this little baby that has turned 20 years old. So all along, when I wanted to do this celebration of the record, from the get-go, I truly wanted Pat to be in it, because there's no other way, and that's no slight on our bass player Jeff, because for those who don't know, like, I went from being the bass player, and then when Pat left the band, I became the drummer, and then we got Jeff Hershey as a bass player. And so it's kind of strange, because I feel like they're so they're almost like two different bands completely, because we and it's like, it just was a natural progression. We did come to the realization that Pat, or Max, Jeremy, and I didn't want to play pop punk anymore.
Right.
And so the rest of the band's era kind of dictates that, and obviously you hear those
you got
later records, and that's what that sounds like. And and so whatever fans that we might have, like fans that we've gotten from Daylight on, some of them don't even know of the original era, you know, because we were such a different band. And on top of that, the bands that we toured with were nothing like what we were doing the first two records.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we toured on Daylight, we toured with Finger 11. And
right. Oh, yeah, okay.
If that's not like an indication of where we went, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And we toured with Andrew WK, and so it's just a different era of the band completely, you know.
Yeah.
But when we decided to really move forward with this Sadness thing, knowing the band that we had left, you know, when the last time we were a band, like we couldn't get that band to be the band that celebrates this. Like the only right way is to do it with Pat.
Sure.
And thankfully he was into it. And so here we are. That's basically how it went down.
That's awesome.
And we're all really thankful for that, because what a lot of people don't know is that Pat and Jeremy started the band.
Okay, yeah.
And it just seems right to put this back into his hands. And it's cool. It's cool, everything that we've been doing to celebrate this. I started the process, and I'll be the first to say that it wasn't going exactly the way I hoped it would. And once Pat came into the picture a little more, he kind of picked up where he left off, and a lot more things came into fruition. And this anniversary celebration of the record is on a level that truly Pat had everything to do with it being where it is now, because this really went from when him and I were talking about it. This was going to be like all right, dude, remix the record. I'll pay for it to get mastered by Paul Miner, and we'll just throw it on Bandcamp. and then we'll just call it a day.
Right.
And then, you know, here we are. Vagrant has re-released or released the reissue remix of the record digitally, and then the making of the vinyl version and the 7-inch, like that was not like we shot that idea down, but somehow Pat just made it happen. And you know, my hopes and dreams for the record were to do that Bandcamp thing and play a show.
Yeah.
Hopefully with Pat. And so, you know, I got my dream and then some, and we're all super stoked. So
that's awesome, man.
Great.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe quick final thoughts. You're 20 years on now from Sadness. Looking back over whether it's with the album or just the life of the band, is there anything that maybe you wish you could go back and kind of alter a little bit? I know I think there was an interview with Jeremy where he was like, well, I wish I kind of didn't include some of the faster songs on the record because they don't really fit in. But is there anything
That's
looking
funny.
back on it that you're like, maybe I would have done that a little different? Or
Oh man, you know, it's funny that you asked me that question, because I'll be the first to say that we were pretty fucking spoiled,
right,
for the position that we were in, and all the opportunities that we had. And I think given our age, like I think I was 17 when we did that Good Riddance tour. I turned 18 on the tour. Max was like, I don't think he had a driver's license. Straight up.
yeah,
So we were teenagers when we did that Good Riddance tour. And so I think in hindsight, our age was probably one of the things that held us back the most, because we weren't able to see things through an adult perspective.
yeah.
And had we been more mature, older, I think we would have made wiser decisions on things. If you follow the band, you notice that there's quite a few years, at least 2 years in between records,
Yeah.
if not more, and I think, well, some of it, as dudes that wear their hearts on their sleeves, I think perhaps the things that we've experienced in our personal lives kind of took precedence over our touring ability,
Mm-hmm.
and our ability to kind of like treat the band a little better. I think we would have toured a bit heavier
Okay.
in
Yeah.
our in between time, and
Yeah.
and perhaps made records a little more frequently. But we can never go back to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as much as I think about, I mean, I don't think about it frequently, but if I think about that whole idea, I think perhaps we would be a little more active, or maybe we wouldn't have taken so many breaks or stopped playing altogether.
Yeah.
But life is what it is, man.
Yeah.
And we're all, at the end of the day, we're all still very close friends. More like, that's number one,
Yeah.
more than being a band and playing music together. And that's, I think we can all collectively say that we're truly grateful for that, to have each other in each other's lives, and have this opportunity. And while we can't really treat No Motive as a way of, like, we're not trying to make a living doing anything No Motive related. We're just enjoying each other's company and being thankful for having people enjoy our band and care about us. So
Yeah.
whatever opportunities that we can do, we can partake in collectively, we're very thankful for. And that's way more important than like looking back and wondering about the what ifs and all that,
Right.
and all that stuff. Cause all of us could do that. I could do that for every band I've been in. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
life is what it is. And at the end of the day, we're just thankful for this opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, man, like, who knows? Like, running the Sadness Prevails stuff. I mean, Face to Face took 9 years between albums at one point. Who knows, right? maybe after all of this is all said and done, you guys are just like, yeah, why not? We could do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah, who
knows?
I'm the lone member of No Motive that isn't married with kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we work within our means, and we're a bunch of very realistic dudes.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
I think we honestly enjoy the fact that we could do this, and it's not like the success or whatever of what we do is going to dictate whether or not we put food on the table.
Yeah.
Like this is just straight up for our enjoyment and fans of the band's enjoyment, and it does not need to be anything more than that, because
That's awesome.
we've all kind of come into our own in our lives, and we're all happy. So it's cool, man.
Hey, if you're still here, super cool. This is like the, I guess you could say, post-credit scene that all those Marvel movies made super famous and awesome, I guess. What happened here is I stopped recording, or I said I was done the interview, and then I kept recording, and Roger just had more things to say that I thought were pretty cool, so I figured, hey, we're going to include them in the episode. But before I do that and finish you up with these last few minutes, I just thought I would say, hey, thanks for tuning in to Growing Up Punk. And make sure you follow us on our social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at Growing Punk Pod, and you can find us on Instagram at Growing Up Punk. And if you want to follow myself, I am on Instagram and Twitter at David Growing Up. This has been a blast, but this is the remainder of the interview with Roger Camero of No Motiv, talking about 20 years of And the Sadness Prevails. I did want to say, so you were mentioning that you said Vagrant, have they released the digital stream?
Yeah, if you, it's funny. I mean, we're extremely thankful and grateful for them to do the work and putting it online through all of, as far as I know, it's available everywhere.
Yeah.
It's definitely on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, Google, Amazon, whatever.
I was going to say, because I was looking on Apple Music. I'm like, it's not there. At least I can't find it. Unless it's
just... Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, no, I see what they've done. No, it's there. It's there. No, I'm wrong. I see what they've done is it's not, I guess because when
it still says 99
It still
on
says
it,
99.
Right?
Yeah. Whereas sometimes they release it and it's like, well, when it's the update. So now I'm pumped to go listen to that because I hadn't heard it yet. I just heard
cool.
the couple that you had sort of, put out videos for.
So you haven't actually heard it yet?
No, and literally,
yeah,
I was to say,
I can't wait to see what you have to say about that.
Oh, I'm so pumped. Well, I mean, yeah. I was to say the mixes on the few that I'd heard that you guys kind of had released ahead of time or whatever. I was like, oh, yeah, there's definitely. I can get into this. At the same point, I'm also like, I never really would have thought, oh, let's, remix and remaster this record because I always loved it so much. But now I'm pumped to go and actually listen to it now that I've found it. Because I saw, I guess, I don't know if it was Friday. Yeah, I think it was Friday that the Broken and Burned and Life Goes On single came out. And so... Yeah,
both of them came out the same day.
Yeah,
it's just, you got to be like pretty, digital music savvy, geeky to know that it's in there somewhere.
Yeah, well,
they technically put it out, but I mean, if you're a Vagrant Records follower, like we don't even exist on the website, so
right,
they were just doing a solid by hosting it, but there's absolutely no like advertisement or public recognition that it exists. It's just there.
Yeah. But I was going to say, because I did get notified about the Broken and Burned and Life Goes On, but I guess because they're re-recorded, they're listed as 2019, right? Versus 1999. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, now I'm pumped to go listen to that. Sick. I would have been listening to that had I seen it was out. And yeah, the cover artwork it's definitely brighter, hey? Well, I mean, it's brighter and darker all at the same time. Because the
I'm really
black
curious
is darker.
how it's going to come out on vinyl, man. I'm excited to see it. And I hope you like the remix, man. It was such a trippy experience, to be honest with you. Yeah. When we were transferring it from tape to Pro Tools, I definitely got very emotional listening to it. Yeah. And in the time, like I made a point to make bounces of the songs like not touched, just raw as raw could be, and I think it got some of us pretty emotional, and I really wanted to just kind of touch on some of the things that maybe some of us were always a little like hesitant on. It's a unique record. I mean, there's hardly a documentation of the recording itself, but um, the studio that we recorded Sadness, the drum room was tiny. It's basically the size of what should be a control room.
Okay.
And it ended up becoming the control room for when we made Diagram for Healing.
Funny.
That drum room became the control room.
Right.
And then they elaborated and built an actual nice size drum room for Diagram. And so, yeah, that's the same studio where we recorded that. And I know you are a Face-to-Face fan.
Yeah.
They recorded How to Ruin Everything at that studio.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's why.
And they built a stage in the drum room and recorded it live.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. No, I mentioned that being one of my favorites, if not my favorite Face-to-Face album. So that's pretty sweet.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Sadness did not have a quote unquote drum room sound. It was dry as dry can be.
Yeah.
And so when they mixed the record at the studio called the Complex in I think Culver City, they ran the drum tracks through really huge, nice studio monitor speakers.
Yeah.
Just the drum tracks, and put really nice microphones at the end of this humongous room, like the size of a venue, and created a drum sound out of that.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So that kind of odd slap back drum sound that you hear predominantly on Nostalgia.
Yeah.
That's that recording of the sound of the drums coming through the speakers being recorded.
Oh man.
Like that is not a real drum sound. And so as cool as that is, the idea of it, I think that's like one of the things about the record that irked us for 20 years.
Yeah.
So that was like one of the main things we wanted to kind of put a twist on.
So
So
how did you then, I guess, rectify that, make that, change that up with still working with the same masters?
Nowadays
Magic.
I didn't I didn't highly doctor anything. I kept it, I believe, in a tasteful place.
Cool.
I didn't go overboard.
Yeah.
But there's reverb plugins now that model drum rooms and all that mumbo jumbo. So whatever mixing techniques I did, I believe pretty organically.
Yeah. No, that's
I didn't
awesome.
literally try to make it sound like the Black Album, which we always joke about wanting records to sound like the Black Album, but yeah.
That's
we
funny.
weren't going to get that with this.
I mean, it's interesting though, because you mentioned you bringing up the drums and nostalgia, and just how that's like the drum sound on that song is very, I guess, distinct. Like I haven't really heard anything else I've listened to that sounds like that. And whether, I mean, some people may love it, some people may hate it, or just be indifferent, whatever. Like it is what it is. But it's definitely, as soon as that, ba-bap, when the snare kicks in, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what this is. I don't even have to hear the rest of the drum intro, right? Like in my ear, I go, oh yes, this is No Motiv and the Sadness Prevails.
Hell yeah, that's awesome, man. There's like there's still a little tinge of it there. It's just barely there.
Yeah.
Now when I hear it, it just sounds like Pat's drum set in your face.
Right.
And I think that's all we were really going for is the original mix of the record. The guitars are so loud and full and awesome.
Yeah.
And I think we just wanted the drums to complement that this time around.
Yeah.
And on the original mix of the vocals, I mean, if you follow the band, you have literally heard the evolution of Jeremy's voice.
Yeah.
Like that, wherever his voice has gone, that's just a natural progression, and people have caught it from his teenage years. That's basically how it went down. So, I think we wanted to take away some of that double vocal effect and let some of his singular vocal track kind of come through a little bit more on this version of the record.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that was our reason behind literally everything with that new mix is all of us have the original version of the record. There's no point in me remixing the record to try to match that.
Yeah.
That's just pointless.
Yeah.
Nobody needs that.
Yeah.
So keep it all in good taste, but give it a new life, I guess. And so, a little more, I think, organic sounding, a little more like, less studio sounding, I guess. I don't know.